Hey, what's up, class? I decided to try something a little bit different to kind of try to give you instructions in as close to real time as possible. Um, so what I'm going to ask you to do a couple times is work on this through the actively learn. When you get to a spot where I say stop, pause, and do this, I want you to pause the video and then go do what I said and then hit play again. Cool? All right, pause the video, answer this question. Perfect. All right. What I want you to do is take your copy of the things they carried, and I want you to turn to the chapter Enemies. That's the first chapter we're on. It's on page 59, right? And those next two chapters, Enemies and Friends, they're very short. It's like 4 pages, okay? Um, but in this chapter, notice in the last chapter, speaking of courage, excuse me, in the last chapter on the Rainy River, we talked about boundaries, right? How there is a clear line between two different things. What I want you to do is, as you read Enemies and Friends, ask yourself, how does the author use contrasts, juxtapositions, showing how things are different right next to each other? And what is that showing us about that line, that distinction, that boundary? All right, so I want you to read Enemies through, actually all the way through. Okay, pause the video, and I want you to read Enemies all the way through up to this line where it says, but that wasn't the bizarre part. Pause the video and do that now. Perfect. All right. What I want you to do is answer the couple questions that follow now. All right. Now that you've answered those questions, keep moving ahead. Notice this last part, but that wasn't the bizarre part. The word bizarre is kind of key there. It's doing a lot of work. Um, and I want you to read through the end and pay very specific attention to that last line. Pause and do that now. Cool. Now answer the next question. Then we'll move on to the next story. Perfect. All right. Now, the next chapter is called Friends. Okay. And you'll notice friends, real different than enemies, except are they? Right? In this chapter, you're going to witness something that's both gruesome and something that's both kind of touching. Okay. I want you to read, as you read this chapter all the way through, and keep in mind, this is only 2 pages. I want you to really ask yourself, what is Dave Jensen Lee Strunk's friend or his enemy in this circumstance, right? And how does that shift based on Lee Strunk's perspective? All right, pause the video and read this now. Okay. Now I want you to consider a couple things. Go to the first page, right? As I'm reading, I'm noticing some stuff. I'm noticing that there's a clear distinction between, in late August they make a pact. So there was a before and after they made that pact, right? And that pact is, if one of them should ever get totally messed up, a wheelchair wound, the other guy would automatically find a way to end it. So I'm noticing there those characters are seeing a wheelchair wound as a boundary between, this is life is worth living and life is not worth living. Um, so I'm asking myself as a reader, what does that wheelchair stand for? It stands for maybe dependence, maybe a sense of limitation, maybe a sense of crossing boundary. Maybe just like in the beginning, if it's self-inflicted, maybe it would be fear, right? Or courage. The These aren't just like it was in the chapter The Things They Carried, and then again in the chapter on the Rainy River. Um, that that clear boundary between those two things. Now, skip forward a little bit um, after Lee Strunk passes out, and then wakes up and says, and finally realizes his leg is gone. Jesus, man, don't kill me. Um, and he's trying to down talk it, but skip down to the end right after like this kind of beautiful interaction. The very last line. Later, we heard that Strunk died somewhere over Chow Lai. which seemed to relieve Dave Jensen of an enormous weight. And like that makes me kind of wonder, like, what was he carrying? Take a second and just answer that now. Cool. Now let's talk about the structure of these two chapters, right? Um, Enemies and friends seem like they're opposites, but at the same time, it's the same two characters running along the same kind of parallel time frame, one after the other. So I want to ask you, and think back to math, right? Remember how parallel is like two lines that never touch, they don't intersect, but they follow the same trajectory, versus perpendicular, things that cross at one point and go in exact opposite directions. So I want to ask you, do you think these chapters are more parallel or perpendicular in terms of structure, right? Do you think the chapters are going, along the same trajectory, but they never touch? Or do you think that the chapters intersect at one point and then go in opposite directions? All right. After you answer that question, then you should take out your after you answer that question, we'll come back. Perfect. Okay, now take out your concept map and add those, like what you noticed from these chapters, to your concept map. Make absolutely certain that you connect what you noticed here to other chapters previous, to other things you noticed. Try to add a page number to your concept map, to really help you later on.